May I have your attention, please? It's my pleasure now to introduce the Dean of the School of Continuing and Professional Services. The Heyman Center is part of that school, and the Dean is very important to us. Before he came to NYU, he was head of continuing education at the University of California, which under his leadership was one of the largest schools of its kind in this country and perhaps in the world. It's appropriate that he open this conference because he has extensive experience in international education. He was the Deputy Executive Director and Director for Europe for the Council on International Educational Exchange. I don't do big introductions, and he doesn't want a big one. In the book that you're going to get tomorrow, his full biography will be listed. It is very impressive, and it is my pleasure to introduce to you Robert Lappner.
Thank you and welcome. It's a great honor for me to welcome all of you on behalf of New York University and the School of Continuing and Professional Studies. It's also a particular honor to be able to acknowledge Naomi Levine for her leadership at the Heyman Center and her leadership in the world of philanthropy at NYU and in New York for so many years. This extraordinary building that we're in with these spectacular views of Fifth Avenue are really the result of the partnership between former President Jay Oliva and Naomi Levine, and of course the Kimmel family, in making this space available. So please help me thank them. As Naomi mentioned, I did have an international career, and so it is especially meaningful for me to welcome our guests from 14 countries. 14 is a bit larger than a little bit smaller than the 18 schools that make up NYU. But I think it might be useful for those of you who are not from our university to give you a very, very short overview of the university and our school with regard to our international presence. Tomorrow morning, our president, John Sexton, will be speaking to you, and he's certain to talk about NYU as its identity as a global network university. John couldn't be here this evening because he's giving a talk in Michigan, and I think he's arriving here directly from the airport tomorrow morning. The university currently has 18 discrete schools and colleges. Our school was established in 1934. We are one of those schools. We have about 25,000 worldwide degree-holding alumni, and we are currently about the 5th largest graduate school at NYU and the 6th largest undergraduate college. If any of you have traveled the subways of New York, you may have seen signs about our vast program of public education outreach, which for many defines us, but it's a false picture. We have always been involved in providing access to educational opportunity to residents of New York, but in truth, over our history, we have become a locus for gathering the expertise of extraordinary practitioner communities in fields where New York may have an important place on the global stage, one of them being philanthropy. So today we have currently 8 academic divisions, which reflect an aggregation of intellectual capital, both full-time faculty and extraordinary expert practitioners who are associated with us in the teaching and learning experience. And we educate, as I mentioned, about 5,000 undergraduates and graduates, but we also reach about 35,000 working professionals a year. Most of our instruction is here, but some of it's online, and we have been organizing some programs around the world, or around the country at least, for decades. The Heyman Center was created under the presidency of Jay Oliva in our school, and it represented as well a recognition of the importance of the practice of philanthropy and the role of foundations in civic life and their concentration in New York. And under the direction of Naomi, it has become a truly important, we think, international resource for educating professionals in the field of development, as well as for foundation heads concerned, foundation professionals seeking to make enlightened decisions in grant making. But we also hope that we have a role in helping to encourage enlightened philanthropic giving in general. You may know that, and I anticipate it'll be mentioned tomorrow, that one of the founding ideas of NYU, established as a result of correspondence between Jeremy Bentham and Albert Gallatin, who was then Secretary of Treasury in the United States, was to create a university which was in and of the city, and to serve the professional classes of the city in ways that the universities founded centuries before had been in somewhat of a retreat from the world of practice. So there's a great similarity in many ways in the originating mission of NYU and University of London. But what is important here is that our school, in many ways, because of its connection to the industries of New York, has been a particular articulation of this notion of being in and of the city, and increasingly in and of the world, which really leads to why we're having this event tonight. In the 21st century, everything is interconnected. And we live in an integrated economy, a competition for resources, a commonality of needs, and overlapping constituencies. One of my good friends who had been I guess he was a dean, the head of a college in Oxford, would visit with me in Los Angeles and now, and more recently in New York, every time he came here raising money for Oxford in the US. So I know our constituencies overlap. Our school was also home in its academic divisions to the Center for Global Affairs. And you'll be hearing from one of our colleagues there, Vera Jelinek, who is the head of the division, on Saturday. That center also aggregates expertise in the world of both the public and the private sector involved in various aspects of the world. And it's obvious that in areas like humanitarian assistance, the role of the private sector and philanthropy, in many ways, is becoming more important than the capacities of governments who are motivated by different objectives. Our country does not have, and the Heyman Center does not claim, we do not claim together to know everything. Our school is predicated on the notion that the adult professional brings into the classroom knowledge and expertise which in fact informs the learning experience. So in the next 2 days, or 2.5 if you count tonight, I hope that everyone speaking will learn from the participants in the room, because we will come away better informed about what we do by learning about what you're doing in your countries and your organizations. The UK Charities Commission goes back to the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. I hope I'm not stealing anyone's talk. I had to go before them a number of years ago when I was working in Europe and established a charitable trust in the UK. And as someone who originally studied 17th century British theatre and taught Shakespeare, it was a particular treat, I must say. But while the US cannot claim to have in any way a monopoly on the notion of philanthropy, in our country, for a variety of reasons, as you know, the role of private giving has had a singular importance. Part of it has to do with our ideology, which doesn't expect the government to do an awful lot in certain domains. Some of it has to do with what de Tocqueville first observed about the role of associations in civic life and the way individuals and groups tend to bring resources together for what they consider to be a particular good. And while our nation's ideology vacillates between different views of what the government should properly do, there's no doubt that both our tax policies and our social structure, and maybe the values in our civic society, favor giving. It's also true that as far back as the 18th century, there have been oligarchic concentrations of wealth which allowed for the distribution of resources even without a progressive tax scheme. The point is that philanthropy and giving have been a vital part of the United States in ways that they haven't been in other countries. And while the need for private support to responsibilities that were once considered the sole province of government is growing, our experience may be useful, but it is certainly not the only model that should be promulgated. And that is why the next 2 days are so important, because we really are here to learn from each other and also to encourage a sense of professional network amongst all of you so that even when you leave and go back to your universities, your foundations, your organizations, and your different countries, you feel connected to each other through a shared community of interest. I have a particular honor this evening of not introducing our keynote speaker, but of introducing a wonderful colleague who will introduce our keynote speaker. And I'd like to segue here because Doug Hunt, excuse me, I used to work with Doug White, for many years in my international life. And actually, that was the first project that we did with the UK, which is why I made this mistake. Doug White is the academic director of the Heyman Center and a clinical associate professor, a greatly respected expert himself. He's written some very important books on ethics and the world of not-for-profit, Charities on Trial, What You Need to Know Before You Give, an important book that won the Staley Robinson St. Lawrence Prize for Research by, I believe, the National Association of Fundraising Professionals, The Art of Planned Giving, and most recently, the Nonprofit Challenge, Integrating Ethics in the Purpose and Promise of Our Nation's Charities. We are beholden to Doug for having persuaded our keynote speaker to join us this evening, and therefore, to him the honor. Thank you.
Aren't we lucky to be here tonight? Just look outside the window. Look at all of those lights. Look up Fifth Avenue and look at this wonderful city. And just imagine how that all pales to the energy in this room tonight. This is one of the reasons I love fundraising. This is one of the reasons I love nonprofits, because we're always thinking about what can be. We're not tied to what has been in the past, and we're always looking to the future as to how we can make society better in a unique way, different from the way government and business do it. It is my honor to be here tonight as the academic director of the Heyman Center, and it's my honor to welcome you and to meet all of you tonight. I hope the next 2 days will be a wonderful experience for all of us. I want to thank you, Dean Lappner. You have done so much to help this Heyman Center grow over the last few years. You have done a lot to support our programs, and you have done a lot to support Mrs. Naomi Levine, whom I am honored to learn from. I may have learned a lot in my life, but she is the chief. And thank you. But before I introduce our speaker tonight, I also want to acknowledge some other people. The staff here who have served you so well and diligently tonight, and my staff and our staff at the Heyman Center. The staff at the Heyman Center has worked very hard, and as they say, some say the devil's in the details, some say God is in the details, but by God, there are details. And the Heyman Center staff has done a great job of putting it all together, and I want to thank them right now and publicly do so right now. Now, I'd like to introduce a person known by most of her friends as Steve. You'll notice that identifier at the bottom of the bio we've distributed, and you may wonder why this woman is named Steve. I asked that question of Roberta DiStascio some years ago. Roberta is an old friend with deep roots herself in the world of philanthropy, and she has known Steve since before her appointment. Today, Roberta, my good friend and the ambassador's chief of staff, is heading up a wonderful initiative, which you will learn about tonight. This evening will be hard for many of you to comprehend, and for that I am thankful. Stephanie decided early on that running a company, a technology company at that, might not be all that easy in a world dominated by male chauvinism. So Steve it became, and for many, she is still Steve. Perhaps those men in the business world of the 1960s didn't understand how powerful this woman could be. Of course, when you're young and you escape from a hostile Germany without your parents and later land in England with nothing, well, you tend to become strong. By the way, you have heard of the Giving Pledge, all of you? The Giving Pledge, announced last year by Bill Gates, the pledge where Bill Gates and others are asking billionaires across the country and across the world to donate half their assets to charity. A good idea? A lot of people think so. Well, you may be interested to know that the person you are about to hear from 20 years ago pledged to give all of her money to charity before she dies. Last summer, she was quoted as saying, "It's all being spent. I have ring-fenced a little to ensure my husband and that I don't end up in penury. Everything in my will goes to charity." Well, believe me, you are about to hear from one remarkable human being. So remarkable that a few years ago, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Gordon Brown, asked her to take on an enormous responsibility. Officially, it was an appointment from the Cabinet's office. Dame Stephanie is on a journey, a quest, that she is asking other countries, including the United States, to join. I am, and I hope you are as well, eager to hear more. Please join me in welcoming Great Britain's founding ambassador for philanthropy, Dame Stephanie Shirley.
Better put that sideways, maybe. Chairman, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, first I do want to thank the leadership of the New York University Heyman Center for Philanthropy and Fundraising. I want to thank John Sexton, who unfortunately is not here today, Dean Robert Lappner, Naomi Naveen, who already hosted a lovely English tea party this afternoon with scones and cucumber sandwiches. It was really lovely. And in particular, Doug White, the academic director of the centre, for inviting me here to speak. It's such a pleasure to be with people who are also all committed to the concept of giving. You're interested, you do it, this is your world. And I would point out that in a hungry world, aren't we lucky to wine and dine so well? My aim tonight is to add to your understanding of philanthropy by outlining a little of my own story, starting in poverty, including the business success that was relied on women, and my commitment to putting my wealth to work. And I'll then go on to consider what my latest role as the British government's founding ambassador for philanthropy could offer you as we take the idea global by giving philanthropists a voice worldwide, and by having countries, including the USA, appoint their own ambassadors for philanthropy. And I'll be urging you to join together with us to unleash philanthropy, but more of that later. Let me introduce myself, for Doug has already started it for me. I mean, everyone's life is in three parts. There's a learning phase, an earning phase, and a returning phase. I certainly learned a great deal in my early life as an unaccompanied child refugee. When I was 5 years old, my German Jewish parents put me on a kinder transport, you call them kinder train, a very brave thing. They sent me into the arms of strangers, thinking never to see me again. I was one of 10,000 boys and girls who, arriving in London, I was stateless because Hitler had taken nationality away from the families. I was penniless because we're not allowed to bring any money out. And of course, without a word of English. Actually, my father had taught me some useful phrases, so I could say things like, slow combustion stove. Very useful, very useful. A vine screen Viper. But I didn't, know how to ask to go to the bathroom. Now, I was very lucky because the family was later reunited. I was fostered by a wonderful English couple with a reassuring name of Smith, who brought me up as they would their own, and I am their child, really. I was a hard-working child, collecting blackberries and rose hips and harvesting potatoes, the sort of things that English children were expected to do during the war. And I started off by supporting, as many children do, I think, an animal charity. I learnt to volunteer to help at events so that I could get into the events for free. And that strange childhood influenced me in three quite separate ways. I learnt in those years to cope with change and to welcome that tomorrow is different from today and certainly nothing like yesterday. And I also learnt to deal with my survivor guilt, that irrational guilt at having survived when so many millions died, including 1 million children, by making each day count, to make my life worth saving. And finally, as a migrant, I love my country with a passion perhaps only someone who has lost their human rights can feel. Thank you very much for bringing the Union Jack here tonight. So now to the earning phase of my life. I'm often asked for the secrets of commercial success. One secret is to choose your partner very carefully. The other day, when I said my husband's an angel, a woman in the front row complained. "You're lucky," she said, "mine's still alive." In my first job, I went to evening classes for years to get my degree, and again, volunteering provided my social life. And later, I founded a 20th century cottage industry for women in the software world, computer world. I founded that company with all of £6. How much would that be? $10, something like that. And that eventually became a large and truly international company that floated on the London Stock Exchange. But it was a company of women, a company for women, and I was a pathfinder in the professionalism of women, especially in the high-tech areas. And for years, I was the first woman this, the only woman that. And if my life has a theme, it is empowerment. Empowerment of women, empowerment of colleagues and the workforce, and empowerment of people with disabilities. In those days, nobody expected much from women. I mean, all the expectations were then about home and family responsibilities. I couldn't accept that, and I started challenging the conventions of the day, even adopting, as you now know, the name Steve in my business letters to get through the door before anyone realized that he was a she. I wanted opportunities for women to combine a vigorous professional career with rearing the family. And I recruited professionally qualified women who had left the computer industry on marriage or when their family was expected and structured them into a home working organization. The employment policy then was simple: jobs for women with children. And later, careers for women with children. And later still, recruiting more women who were supporting and looking after disabled husbands and elderly parents, what we now call elder care. That changed to careers for women with dependents. And 13 years after we started, employment equality legislation came in, and we had to start employing the men if they were good enough. And all that was a way of giving opportunities to women. And given that history, you'll not be surprised that I believe that investing in women and girls produces real, tangible benefits, not just for those individuals, but for their families, their communities, and their nations, and that is especially true in today's economic climate. Women may, all too often, we find ourselves at the bottom of the heap. But the poverty faced by many women in the world does not stop them from putting resources to good use if they can, whether it's starting a business, as I did, or ensuring education for children, again, as I did. We know of the impact of such innovations such as microcredit, and we've seen what education for girls can produce. We know that as the wealth of women rises, the extra money is spent well on housing, clean water, better food for the families. And if one can generalize about our gender, we do not waste, whether it's money, resources, or time. Instead, we work, we save, and we invest in the future. If the world wants development, equity, and sustained growth, an investment in women will pay dividends. Let me now start talking about giving back, returning. I mean, not only did my company's success make me wealthy, at one time I could be found a few places behind Her Majesty the Queen in the UK's female rich list. But I was awarded a dameship, the female version of a knighthood, for services to information technology, and that's a high civic honor of which I'm very proud. But my husband and I live modestly in retirement, with my time spent entirely on the returning phase of my life. But I have a wonderful quality of life, working hard with interesting people on worthwhile projects. Gone are the days when women only became wealthy by marrying or inheriting money. And since all my wealth comes from that computer company, I started off by giving the shares away. Firstly, to the staff, and then to the various charities. To avoid a heavy tax penalty, the shares could not be sold on for 6 months, but I don't like gifts with strings attached. So the solution was to set up a charitable foundation, the Shirley Foundation, to take the shares and 6 months later provide unencumbered checks. And I'm always surprised in a way that the foundation was triggered by a tax issue, because in general, I maintain tax is not as important as people think. Now, the Shirley Foundation's mission is to be pioneering. We never do more of the same. However strategic, however valid, however exciting, no matter how worthy, we don't do more of the same, but we do concentrate on the strategic side, by which I mean that concentrating on projects that make a real difference. Though we know that pioneering projects can and do fail, and in a sense, if we did have no failures, I'd reckon we were not taking sufficient risk, because that's what philanthropists can do. Because of my professional background, some of the big donations have concerned information technology, from education to exploring the social, economic, legal, and ethical issues of the internet. But the vast bulk has gone on work related to the lifelong development disability of autism. Autism hampers people's communication and social interaction. Why autism? It was my late son's disorder. My Giles was our only child, a beautiful baby. I know every mother says that, but a beautiful baby who turned, calm, quiet baby, who turned into a wild, unmanageable toddler. He went to a good primary school for non-communicating children, and we had some relatively calm years, but he flipped completely when puberty hit, far too early, and we couldn't find a secondary school that would take him at all, and things only got worse. When he was 13, I broke down completely, and both of us finished up in hospital. I came out of mine after about a month and was back at work within the year. It was quite a serious breakdown. But Giles stayed in a locked ward of a psychiatric hospital, and he stayed in that ward for 11 years. I mean, autism can be a devastating disorder. My first big autism project had Giles as the first resident in the first home of the first charity that I set up. And that now supports 52 adults, all with autism and what is euphemistically called challenging behavior. Now, ethics, as I was saying earlier, Doug, ethics are the heart of pro bono activities. And I believe that giving is a social and cultural activity. It's not a financial transaction. Sure, money can be given as a compassionate act of detachment. But in giving to make a difference, I try to make it a committed act of love. I started with that hands-on support service for my son. Love transcends death, and autism continues as an ongoing focus of my life. My biggest project, financially, took me 5 years. It was to create a specialist school that today has 60 day and residential pupils, all with, it's modeled on my Giles, all with autism and developmental and challenging behavior. I mean, few of them have any speech whatsoever. And it has an associated adult learning center opening in September, so it's a major, major. Because over the years, whenever I found a gap, from medical research to family support services or political awareness, I tried to help, whether through charities, university research centers, political groupings, or new institutions. And there have been donations, large and small. The small ones always given regularly so that the charities have a chance to plan. But every one of them was accompanied by involvement and the commitment of my time and energy. It is demeaning to just give money. And anyway, one wants the fun and adrenaline buzz of commitment. And I believe if you don't commit, you're really just taking up space in the world. For the Shirley Foundation's 10th annual review, we did some numerate assessments of impact and outcomes based on the recipients' measures. And the larger, more strategic projects scored higher, but there was little conclusion. Short-term metrics mean very little to projects with very long elapsed times. But the exercise itself, I thought, was worthwhile. Our strict focus on information technology and autism, because we had that focus, that gradually reduced the volume of requests for funding. Yet my latest $1.5 million donation was totally off mission. Why? I was attracted by the opportunity to make a big impact. And philanthropy doesn't go to the neediest projects, but what gives most pleasure to the donor. There's no ought or should about philanthropy. Let me talk a bit more about giving. I put as much effort into learning to give money away wisely and take just as much satisfaction as I got from earning it in the first place. Like alchemy, so far over $100 million has been transmuted from figures on a sheet of paper to something meaningful. And that aside, my wealth creation and persuasive policies probably did more than my philanthropy to benefit the lives of others. No point in giving it away unless you have a good company. And I really feel that giving has made my wealth significant. Giving is now what I do, and it gives me enormous satisfaction. It's the right thing to do. Giving is fun and makes me feel good. And that feel-good factor is a scientific fact, because brain scans show that the pleasure centers of the brain are stimulated when we act unselfishly. When you first have more than you need, one's reactions are usually emotional and immature. It takes time and reflection to realize that giving is more fun. And if, like me, people have helped you through difficulties in your life, then giving serves as some sort of repayment. Giving is always a private expression of personal beliefs. Perhaps the motives hardly matter. Giving is the defining characteristic of the human race. Sikhs believe in life in 3 equal dimensions, one of which is sharing one's time, talents, and money with the less fortunate. The Quaker Society of Friends always, but not always, but nearly always, gives anonymously. Muslims prefer to give in charity to individuals rather than to charity, much more difficult. And like many Jews, believe that giving is a duty, not just an option. And giving to somebody to help their self-sufficiency is viewed as more valuable than giving which might engender a dependency culture. For my part, I have no religion. My spiritual aim is simple: do as you would be done by. And giving is some sort of justice in an unfair world. It's always fun. My personal belief is that giving should be proactive, ambitious, and focused on results. My aim is always to be professional, efficient, and effective. Over the years, my giving has become more and more strategic. The money may be important, but the passion and the human touch must also be there, so as not to patronize beneficiaries. I know from having received charity myself and have been expected to be grateful how easy it is to patronize. So I give with a warm hand and liberal spirit, and I give now. What's the point of writing gifts into my last will and testament? I want the fun now. I am lucky to have something to wake up for each morning. I meet more interesting people, travel purposefully to more interesting places, and feel so fulfilled, more fulfilled as a social entrepreneur than ever I did in the 30 years spent making money. Giving and the service of others is making my fortune significant. And the more I give away, the richer my life seems to become. Now let me move on to my work as the British government's founding ambassador for philanthropy, and my pledge to inspire the idea that giving is a pleasurable act of desire as well as compassion, to help change or challenge any aspect of society by raising the bar on our capacity to be generous. It was very humbling to be asked by Gordon Brown, then Britain's Prime Minister, now Doctor of this university, to take this honorary post. And the honor is that it's not paid. Apparently, I was selected because the powers that be thought that I represented a modern model of philanthropy, and I hope my selection was because I'd moved on from being a check-writing giver to one with strategic ambitions and goals. I'd certainly learnt to speak out about my giving, out loud, to empower others to emerge from anonymity and share their philanthropic experiences, share their motives. I'd made my own money and was a woman, breaking barriers along the way, and I also had first-hand knowledge of the goodness and generosity of the British welcoming me as a child. I shall always be thankful for being welcomed, and never forgot, shall never forget. To be honest and frank with you, it's likely that the original idea for the position of an ambassador was, well, unthought out. There was an expectation that I would write some hefty reports. But there was no brief or, Dame Stephanie, would you do this or would you do that? It was just the opposite. It was a blank slate, an open door into an empty room, all white and permeated with light. And this suited me just fine. Ambassador for Philanthropy, I would rise to the title and forge a vision that would be ambitious and inclusive, that would speak for those founders and givers who had come before me down the ages, who had left their mark on the ancient institutions and history that still inspires us all today, to make life better across the board for our fellow creatures of the universe. Once upon a time, Britain was the leader in philanthropy, and it could be again. But in stark contrast to the USA, Britain just hasn't been known for talking out loud about giving. So I felt that if I was to do, or sought to do, anything lasting at all, I should give philanthropists a voice and encourage them to talk about it, their giving, so that others may understand and begin to talk as well about why and who they give to. So one of the seeds being sown has been an online website, the original website, ambassadorforphilanthropy.com, which doesn't tell, but it shows, because it shows videos of philanthropists, including myself, discussing giving, the nuts and bolts, the motives and emotions, the problems and pleasures. And for those who say that the reserve Brits don't talk about money and what we do with it, the site has proved that the Brits are open to sharing with others our unique stories of putting money to good use. We learn from stories. They have influence. And that's why I've shared my story, and others are sharing theirs. From that website, we began to get inquiries from around the world asking how countries could appoint their own ambassador for philanthropy. And then I got an invitation to give a keynote speech at a convening meeting in Barbados of all the Commonwealth countries. There are 53 of them, all once a vital part of the British Empire. That was a turning point. There appeared to be a vital interest of how philanthropy, and in particular personal strategic giving, could be enlivened, positioned, seeded, embodied within the citizenry of both advanced and the new emerging nations. From there, and this is all happening this year, the Ambassador for Philanthropy project has formed a partnership with the 75-year-old British Council. And this builds engagement and trust through the exchange of knowledge and ideas between people worldwide. It is in 127 countries, and we're to hold an Ambassadors for Philanthropy Global Summit in London this coming November. Perhaps associated with the Philanthropy Day that you have in this country and in Canada, and that North American concept can also be widened enormously. So it starts with a reception. Ours will be in Buckingham Palace. This global summit will also bring together country representatives to jumpstart the idea of appointing individual ambassadors for philanthropy. And also we shall invite philanthropists from each country to bring their voice into the dialogue, as well as non-profit organizations who are members of the Ambassadors for Philanthropy project. They can represent their own donors, their own ideas. All this is to give philanthropists a voice worldwide by advocacy, media, and partnership. We're very excited about the members' idea. Let me tell you more. Members will be non-profits who wish to give their own philanthropists and donors a voice by uploading their personal videos to the Ambassadors for Philanthropy website, telling why they support the members' vision. We've created a video product, it hasn't got a name yet, that will let this crowdsourcing acceleration happen easily. Little fuss, no fancy cameras, no editing, just the philanthropist's face and voice and passion, the basics for communicating directly. We're pleased to announce that the Heyman Center for Philanthropy and Fundraising are one of our founding non-profit members and will join our planning committee for the Ambassadors for Philanthropy Global Summit in London. So thank you, Doug. Thank you, Naomi, for putting your faith in us. We were fortunate to discuss these ideas yesterday with the White House, and this is the first time it's formally been announced, with the White House via President Clinton's, I beg your pardon, Wow. President Obama's, I do apologize, Director of Social Investment, as well as tomorrow, representatives of the Clinton Global Initiative. Both are more than attracted to the vision, and the White House, as Roberta will tell you if you ask, have actually sort of committed themselves. And we welcome you in this audience to join us too by going to the Ambassadors for Philanthropy website and signing up. In conclusion, let me say, across the world, we know that philanthropy is a promising force for good, channeling resources from the successful and wealthy to invest in charities, community groups, and social enterprises to benefit others. Yet I'm convinced that the potential for philanthropy remains significantly unfulfilled, held back by many factors, from tax regulations and bureaucratic rules to the lack of a giving culture. And then there's a limited number of donor role models able to influence others by being willing to discuss why and how they contribute. How can a country achieve the essential changes in behavior and attitudes to foster greater giving, to ensure that it offers a friendly, giving-friendly legislative context? I believe that an ambassador for philanthropy is a great way to prompt change by providing a focus and impetus for action, by highlighting the needs and potential, and by a suitable individual using their profile, personality, and contacts to inspire others to offer more of their wealth, time, and skills. So how does a country start? There's one difficult but vital thing to get right. First, an ambassador for philanthropy must have independence and access. So the individual has the ear of government, yet is able to challenge established thinking, challenge existing practice. And it's obvious why this must be, because philanthropy is independent, it's creative, it's free-willed, and will not flourish if seen as beholden to government or serving anyone's interests except the donor and the recipient. Next, there's got to be a budget for communication, events and publications, and a small staff, small team, I was corrected that, small team, underwritten and funded by the ambassador, and to help ensure that efforts to encourage greater giving reach the right targets, while liaison and regular reporting through a single minister's or cabinet member's office would allow productive dialogue and good coordination with other government departments. Who should a government choose? I'm sure you can think of suitable people on the shortlist, and the ideal paragon would be someone working cross-political parties, willing to devote enough time to the task, a track record as a philanthropist, an excellent reputation, good media and people skills, and the willingness to be persistent in urging necessary changes. Philanthropists lead, governments follow. So today I have an invitation to extend to everyone here that I believe can be of enormous long-term benefit. I'm convinced that the concept of an ambassador for philanthropy is something that will work in each and every country. I'm equally convinced that we can achieve more by working together on such an idea, inspiring all of us to be generous and fostering the conditions in which such generosity can achieve its greatest impact for good. George Heyman Jr. was president of the Federation of Jewish Philanthropies in New York and a trustee of this great university. His spirit applauds this center and joins my call to you tonight. Let us unleash philanthropy together.